All right, well, it's Tuesday, January 26th, 2021. I'm here with my good buddy Bill. Has been such a wonderful friend all these years. If you've seen the video where I've shot this, to me, I think it's a dandy 8-point, and I shot a 10-point, same property a couple years ago. Bill's been just a huge team player in that he runs a consulting business called LTL, Land Management, and Bill's helped me and my brother Chris to better develop and improve the habitat on our family property, develop food plots, and just this man's full of all kinds of wisdom when it comes to this stuff. So that's just one piece of it. He is a scorer for Commemorative Bucks of Michigan. What can you tell us about CBM?
Well, CBM is an organization that's been around since 1981, and basically they're the official record keeper for the state of Michigan, recognized by state law, which is kind of interesting that one of our members was heavily involved and connected to one of the upper administrators within the state, and actually has passed through the state law official record keepers for the state of Michigan. We keep records on turkey, whitetail, bear, and elk. Obviously, whitetails being a big part of our focus, but we also take in a lot of turkey for trophies every year, and then bear more so all the time, and elk as well. Again, been around since 1981, and we produce a record book about every 3 years. We produce the buck facts every year, and then every 3 years that data gets downloaded into a system which provides the permanent record for the state of Michigan. And Ben's holding up the example. As a measure, I'm basically a representative from Ottawa County in Michigan. And again, my number's out there available through the system, through the Buck Facts magazine. Folks contact me. I measure antlers for people. A lot of antlers is my focus here in Ottawa County. But there we have representatives all over the state. Main beam lengths are all measured with steel 1/4-inch tapes. We use this bicycle cable for our main beam lengths. We have a little carpenter ruler, some tape, which I'll show when we actually get the set of antlers and measure what we use the tape for. So these are some of the basic tools, along with a score sheet that we use, a CBM specific score sheet that we use to document the math.
You can see it, but I named him Fang because he has these canines, and that's just kind of a, I don't know, uncommon trait about him that'll make it easy to talk about in the future.
And really, he's a classic example of a mid-northern Michigan, beautiful mid-northern Michigan 8-point. I like them when they come in like this because they're simple and straightforward to measure. Sure. But he's a great example. He's a great example of a lot of the bucks that we shoot here in Michigan. Congratulations, Ben. He's a beautiful buck.
Thank you.
Basically, the process of measuring and the system we use is the same system that Pope and Young has used for years. The system gives credit for length of main beam, gives credit for inside spread, which is perpendicular to the skull plate and side to side, middle of the main beam from left to right. So the inside spread. You get credit for total tine length, and then you also get credit for 4 circumferences. On an 8-point, again, that's real straightforward. You get one between the base and the brow and G2 and G3, and then halfway between the tip and the G3 is the 4 circumference. Basically, the system also gives credit for symmetry. And we'll talk about typical and non-typical, gross and net scores. The system, for whatever reason, sometimes I have to ask people not to kill the messenger. We just use the system.
Yep.
Gives credit for symmetry. So if you get this antler, these antlers are very symmetrical. Obviously, we have a little breakage damage here, which is going to impact the symmetry a little bit. But other than that, from left to right, from tip to tip, it's all pretty straightforward.
I see things like this antler here is more of a blade to it, or you got this is almost, wants to be another point. Are those things that throw that off as well?
No, those wouldn't throw it off. This would be what they consider. They would consider this in the
detail of the instruction manual is being a hint of a point.
Okay.
But it does not measure, it's not an inch. If you were to put a separation line between the top of the main beam and the tip of that, it would make nowhere near an inch in length. So it doesn't qualify as a point. If that one, did make an inch and it didn't connect on this side, there wasn't one on this side, then you would have some dissymmetry there, and that actually would end up then be a deduction. But in this case, that won't measure, so it won't even be evaluated. Shape isn't so much involved in symmetry. It's more based on the length of point from side to side. Has a lot more to do with what kind of symmetry we're looking at.
Sure. And then, so there's a 60-day dry period, is that right?
Yeah, and it's really about just kind of a standardization, a point of standardization for the measuring. One of our current president of the board has done a study. There's always been an understanding that you get some shrinkage in that first 60 days. Some of it comes in the inside spread as the skull dries and shrinks a little bit.
Okay. But
quite a bit of that actually comes in mass shrinkage. Right around, we figure it's somewhere between 2 and 4% in that first 60 days. So our goal is to go for a 60-day dry period. So we got a kind of a standard set point to start from.
If I have my grandfather's old rack or something like that from 2 decades ago, is it true that I could actually still potentially enter that into the CBM record books?
Absolutely. What we asked for at that time, if it's, we even have a category for pickups. If you find a really nice rack in the woods and you go, this ought to be should be registered, it can be registered as a pickup. But as an owner of a historical rack, what we ask is that you know the hunter's name, you know the county it was taken in, the tool it was taken with, and then did I say the county, the hunter, and what it was taken with. Okay. And then basically our score sheet just allows for a signed personal affidavit that the information you've given us is accurate, and we assume that that's accurate, and 99.99% of the time that's the case. So
yeah,
but we do allow for historical animals to be entered into our book.
All right, well, let's see what this buck here scored.
All right, super. I basically just start with some masking tape. What I want to do is I'm going to put the masking tape on the rack at the base of the tines. One of the critical dimensions in our scoring is to know what our tine lengths are. And in order to do that, the old guys, they used to just put pencil marks all over your antlers, but the new training, they frown on you putting pencil marks all over people's antlers. So we put the tape on, and that's nothing more than, again, just to give us a stationary point to measure to. One of the critical tools we use quite a bit in the process is the bike cable. And what we're going to do with the bike cable, in the case of the antler, the point length, is I place that cable on the main beam, pin it down on the top of the main beam like so. And then I take my pencil and I make a mark at the base of that point as if the main beam passed right on through underneath it. Okay. And it creates a termination point. That's basically where that point will be measured to when I measure the length. Then what I will do is kind of, you get where you've practiced it enough, you don't do it so much with the actual physical blocking like I'm doing with my finger, but basically I'll block both sides of the flare out to then put a line in the center of each one of these points as my end point for my measurement. And you get with practice where I'll usually just put a finger on one side. And basically, again, my goal with this process is to find the center of each point. And really my first measurement that I'm after on my score sheet is my right hand main beam. And I get that measurement by taking the base of my bike cable and I set the catch on the base of that bike cable right underneath the burr, just like so. And my goal is to hit a point where if I was to drill a hole through here and come out on the skull cap on the other side underneath this antler, I'm shooting for 180 degrees separation from my start point. And from there I pushed back to the back of the, further back on the main beam. And this is where having some additional pieces of masking tape where I can get to them is handy. Then I run the bicycle cable down the main beam, and the tape becomes a placeholder. I'm shooting for the center of the main beam based on distance from the bottom to this mark where I put up there for the points. Based on that, I run the cable down the center of the main beam out to the tip, and then here I have an alligator clip, which allows me to just put the alligator clip right on at the tip of the point, just like so. So my goal there then is to have the length of the main beam measured on the right side. I'll pull that back off, set the antlers down here for a second, get my trusty carpenter ruler out. I'm using my alligator clip as my placeholder. I again hook the bike cable on the tip of my ruler, and I measure to the closest 1/8 of an inch. And I'm going to give him credit for 15 6/8 on the right hand main beam. Then we just start over again from there and do the left side main beam. So that first one measured, the right hand side measured 15 6. The left hand side he's going to get credit for 16 0. And basically our score sheet, this is where our symmetry comes into play. We have a column A and a column B on our score sheet, and each one of the sets of numbers, in this case it's the right main beam and the left main beam. If you see the difference, there's 2/8 of an inch difference in sides. That 2/8 of an inch difference actually becomes a symmetry difference. Everything in the A column gets added up for typical, and everything in the B column then in turn actually gets counted off as deductions. So we got our main beam length. Our next measurement is inside spread. Set there. And the idea behind inside spread is to be parallel to the skull cap. So I can, if I get one that's odd, again this buck is really symmetrical. Sometimes you'll get one that has a skewed rack. You can't set the tape at a funny angle in there to get a expanded or a inflated inside spread. The goal is to hit center of main beam and the widest point center of main beam while remaining parallel to the antler bases. So there we have 13, 14, 14, and 2. 14 and 2/8 inside spread. In our score sheet allows for kind of an interesting detail. We put back in the longest main beam dimension there. I've only ever measured, I think, 2 of a deer, and all the time I've been measuring. If you get one that's real freakish wide, they want you to actually use the length of the longest main beam twice in the measurement system instead of using a crazy wide inside spread. But in this case, the 14.2 becomes the plus on the score sheet. We're just going to measure time length, starting with the right hand side, only because that's the way my score sheet asks for the information. Pull a 1/4 inch steel tape, pull it tight to the lines that I put on there, and just verify that it's from the tip to the line, and I just give him credit to the closest eighth. And in this case, we got 1 6/8. And we go right on down the line with the right hand side. 6 0/8. This G3 has a broken tip. I can only measure what's there. And this G3 comes in at 4 4/8. And we do the same thing on the opposite side, on the left-hand main beam. He's going to get credit for a full 2 inches on that side. 2 0/8. Six 7/8. 5 5/8. And that's the total, the numbers that'll be the math that'll be used in order to come up with a total tine length. And then we get into circumferences, and we have a 1/4 inch steel tape. These are real similar to like seamstress tapes. The point to the 1/4 inch steel tape is it doesn't allow for any stretch, and it also, if you get into a deer, sometimes you'll get into, especially on this base measurement, where there'll be a lot of gnarling, a lot of bumps and stuff around the base, you get credit for that circumference. But we're going to pull, the circumference will be based on the smallest point between the antler base and the brow tine. And I'm going to switch my tape around here. It is, I'm going to give him credit for 3 1. Three and 0. Three and 2. One dimension I did not put on here earlier that I need to mark on here a minute. On an 8-point, your last circumference comes halfway between this mark and the tip. So I'll pull the tape measure, hold it at that point out to the tip. 7 1/2, so 3 3/4. I'm going to put a line on that piece of tape I added on there at 3 3/4. And that'll become my measurement point for my last circumference. And while I'm at it, I might as well do that on the other side a minute too, on the left-hand main beam. I'll pull from the tip back to my mark. Seven and 3. 3 1/2. 3 7/8. That will be my mark from my last circumference on the left-hand side. Sometimes I remember to do that when I'm putting my tapes on originally, and sometimes I don't. Today was one of the don'ts. So the last circumference on the right side is 2 2/8 inches. I'm going to repeat the process on the left. We take a couple other statistics basically and add them to the score sheet, and they're more just identifiers. We just record how many points on each side. The straight 8, that's the simple as it gets. 1 2 3 4 on the left and 1 2 3 4 on the right. And then we do a tip to tip dimension. And again, this doesn't add to the score, but this is an identifier if there was to be a controversy over a given set of antlers, or if you needed additional identification. That's all this is about. We have 7. 7, 4, 11, 11 and 4/8 tip to tip. Again, no bearing on the score. And then we take an outside spread dimension. Some guys are a little bit more sophisticated in this process. Some guys have calipers, they get pretty serious about it. It does not affect a score. I believe that we can get a really good visual on that. And it's 16 and 2 outside spread. And basically from there, it's just a matter of sitting down and doing the math. So basically we have an opportunity with a score sheet here to actually compare left side, right side together against each other, and I'm doing simple subtraction on whichever is the greater of the two. So in the case of the brow tine left to right, there's 2/8 of an inch difference there. There's 7/8 of an inch difference there. And when they start getting any more complicated than that, I just punch them into the calculator for simple efficiency's sake. And we have 1 and 1/8 difference in the G3s. We get added across, that gets added to the score. So we're 1.75 plus 6 plus 4.5. So we've got 12 and 2/8 total. That gets carried to the positive side of the A side of the column. The left-hand main beam, we've got the total time length, we've got 2 plus 9 and 4/8. 2 and 2/8 deductions, total 1 points left. If we have a non-typical rack that has a lot of additional points on it, this whole section is designed, and the score sheet is designed for abnormal points. We would add those all up in that section of the chart. But being that this is just a typical straight 8, I usually just cross them through because I know I don't have to put anything in those spaces. And then we look at circumferences. We compare left and right side. We have 0 and 0/8 difference there. We have 0 and 1/8 difference there. 0, 0, and 0, 1. So we only have a total of 2/8 deductions on circumference length. And then we just measure them, add them up across. It's just a simple mathematical process of adding it all together at that point. I usually will add that up twice before I make a commitment to it one way or the other. Just out of the easy possibility of human error. As it stands right now, we have 90 on the gross, we have 96 and 2/8, but I usually run them numbers a second time because it is plenty easy enough to hit a funny button. $96 and 2 is what we came up with twice. I'm believing my numbers. And then the V column are our deductions that we have based on the way the system is scored. And again, this buck really about as symmetrical as they get. Total of 2 and 6/8 deviation from left to right. Column B for the net score gets deducted from column A. And this deer nets 93 and 4/8 as a typical whitetail. And there you have it.
How about that? Well, I told the people on YouTube if they could guess the exact score that I would ship them the arrow that I shot them with. So I'm not sure if anybody guessed it. So I'll have to check that out. So 100 inches is what would get me in the books. Is that right?
Under 100 inches would be for archery or crossbow kills over 100 inches. And about 3 years ago, I took one that was 105/8 inches. So that was
Okay.
the first one. I have some bigger ones than that, but that was the first one I made both the parameters and just made it in the book at 105/8. So
Yeah. Real close, but no cigar. Now, there are other options if you fall just shy of that 100-inch mark.
a couple of years ago, we started a program providing people with a certificate for $15, just basically to cover the certificate and the handling. You get an official certificate from CBM saying what your deer measured. It doesn't get entered into the record book, but you get the certificate to put on the wall by your mount that it's been officially scored. And that's a program I think this will be our 3rd year doing that.
Okay.
And it was just kind of out of request by folks going, I'd still like to have a certificate. So that's where that came from.
Yeah. Well, it's really nice for that memory. It's a good conversation piece, if nothing else. Yeah. Probably avoid some of those fishing stories of, you came over to my house tonight to measure this, and you said that you volunteer with CBM to do these types of things. Did you come over to my house because we're friends, or is that something that's kind of normal, or?
It depends. You said you had multiple antlers that you wanted to measure. A lot of times, if they're just a single set of antlers and they're easy to transport, I'll have guys come to my house. And some of the measures will have folks drop them off. I really just as soon be able to have a half-hour, 40-minute conversation, get their deer measured, and send it home with them. And that's just a personal preference.
Yeah.
But some of the guys will have folks come by, drop them, and then come back and pick them up in a few days. But my methodology is usually this time of year, especially this year, it seems like there's been a lot of bucks shot that people are interested in having measured. I'll usually set aside a couple nights a week this time of year.
Okay.
Around 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening, and take 2 or 3 and try to keep it down to a couple nights a week. We talk deer hunt pretty much 12 months out of the year at my house, but I try to, for the sake of my wife and my other family members sometimes. Right. So yeah, but that's my standard general rule. But here you had multiple mounts and you had some other ones you'd like to have measured.
Yeah. Okay, and then other opportunities would be, well, one, to locate a measurer like yourself. They would go to the website. It has a list by county of who the measurers are. So for our county, I think there's 2, for instance. But then also you're at shows like the Hunt and Time Expo where you come together and do some measuring.
Under all normal circumstances, yes. If things were normal, we'd be at the Hunt and Time Expo, we'd be at the Deer and Turkey Spectacular in Lansing, we get the Outdoor Rama in Novi, the Birch Run Show, which is I believe is in September. I've never made it over to that. There's an outdoor show there, and then there's one in Gaylord, I believe, that some of our guys out of Traverse City measure there as well. But that's a place where you can come see us in person. And under normal circumstances like the Grand Rapids Show, I'm heavily involved in that one. Being here in Ottawa County, a lot of times we'll measure 40, 50 sets of antlers in a day sometimes at the show there in Grand Rapids.
So Bill, really appreciate it. All that for free, that somebody would actually score your buck and actually listen to your stories passionately about how you took that deer. I'd pay for that, but really appreciate that. That's awesome. Thank you.
Well, and the measuring's free. Then if we hit one that does make book and we want to add it into the book, and then there's a membership fee. There's a $30 membership fee. It all goes to CBM, and really we exist to support the database, which keeps the book. Our records are really the point of what we do, and they're used in a lot of places in conservation and understanding where the deer herd's at and a lot of other places. So
right on. That's really good info. With the fact that you're measuring it for hunters at no charge like that, there's opportunities to donate, to CBM. It's a nonprofit organization. Thank you.